the horror of seven hills, that kind of thing, of which we probably will get into more later on. So I see that the increase or the influx of light is increasing, and change is, we're approaching change at such a rapid pace. It's very difficult to keep up with it. And that's why I think that we have to come together as those who are in search of the light, so we can have, because we have different parts to the story that we have to, you have to talk about to bring the puzzle together. I believe that we are actually on the precipice of such a major change, until when it takes place, even people who are not looking for it will see it. And I'm not talking about they're not going to see it as a political, social, economic change as much as something bigger than us is taking place, that kind of thing. They're going to recognize that it's something outside of the realm of the natural. That's where I believe that, I do believe with everything in me, that that's where we are. And by the way, that's also death.
Somewhere in all this, I think fits, and I've been waiting to throw it out there for a while. I think the author, and interestingly enough, is Catholic. Might be a Jesuit. His name, I think, is John Donne, D-U-N-N-E, who's written a number of books.
Yeah.
Hard to read, but interesting. And there's a phrase in one that stuck with me for years. And okay, I'll admit, obviously it sticks because there's a reason for it to stick for me personally. But his statement was, I may not get the words exactly right, but I think that I got the gist. I remember the gist. I don't have the quote in front of me because I usually have my little packet of quotes. But anyway, unreconciled masculinity results in a lack of intimacy or ability to be intimate. I mean, to me, that's directed, well, I suppose it could be directed to women also, but I just found that a very truthful and certainly representative in terms of the church, etc., characterization. I mean, very profound thing.
You know, what I heard when you said that, maybe I missed what you were alluding to, but what I heard when you said that was that type of masculinity prevents intimacy with the Shekinah.
Yeah.
So you make it up as you go, because you don't have the wherewithal to be intimate with the Shekinah, because you live in, as I just pointed out earlier, a so-called celibate life. So the intimacy is not with feminine. The intimacy is with each other. Homosexuality. Because you don't have the ability to be intimate.
And I just wanted to add that every single culture that does, well, everywhere that women are marginalized in that way, the same thing happens. Men turn to each other.
Yeah.
Or boys.
Yeah,
I was going to say that's a huge problem in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
Well, but I think even in our culture, which on the whole isn't set up in such a way to maybe facilitate the kind of a quote-unquote extreme that you have in Afghanistan and other cultures like that. I think, obviously, that, to me, that's always seemed a source of tension between man and woman, husband and wife. It's just an outward manifestation of that tension or conflict or struggle with masculine and feminine within, and I'm putting myself out there, me. I mean, I don't know how, from a woman's view, it's flipped, but I mean, that's why that kind of phrase stuck with me, even if I could not fully understand how to deal with it, if you know what I mean. But there was a sense of, there's a truth there.
Well, I think
that was years ago.
I think it's desire.
20 years ago.
That desire to, first of all, recognition of of the statement you just made in terms of masculinity. But also, with that recognition has to come a desire to change it. And the desire to change it does not necessarily mean you know how at that moment. But if your desire is pure, then it will begin to filter into your life in terms of changing it. I think a first step is respecting the space of the female. Most men don't give the female the space to grow, to develop, to be free to think, and to be respected as a quote-unquote thinker, to have something to contribute to the massive conversation that's taking place that involves her in every manner. So I think that's a big part of it, because when we look at it, it's always, not always, but in most cases, it is the female is free to do whatever she chooses to do, as long as it's within our parameters that we've set up, either consciously or subconsciously. And that in itself has to be admitted to and dealt with.
And you know, some
And I'll
men,
make the sense first.
you are, but some men will tell you, well, you know what, I don't put limits on my wife, I don't do this or that. But the energy that they send out is totally different.
And that's what I'm saying, Elvin. It's more than the energy there that they send out. So, you know, it's a conscious, subconscious thing that they actually do. You know, not just emanating in terms of sitting and it's coming out. Yeah. But they actually do it. For example, I've had guys that ask me, do you know where's she? I don't know. What do you mean you don't know? She grown. But you don't know what she man it up. But she's not your wife. She has to have that space to be able to be who she is. If that doesn't happen, then what you're actually doing is trying to make her in your image. And when that takes place, you're putting yourself in the place of her God. You see?
Yes.
And you built your own Garden of Eden around her. And yeah, and you built your own Garden of Eden around her, and now she has to acquiesce to whatever you say, either consciously or subconsciously, right? Mm-hmm. And once, what I have seen and played and had to do so much counseling with is that it is done so subtly, and the society is so okay with it until most females don't recognize it until it's almost too late, because they have been so in tune with doing whatever they've been told to do, either openly or subconsciously.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does, and that's why we have so many medical problems.
Of course.
In result of that.
Especially in the reproductive areas. Yeah.
I guess I haven't ever thought about the fact that homosexuality is so rampant in places like Afghanistan. You know,
this book, The Kite Runner,
this macho kind of thing that.
That's where it's most prevalent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just never thought about it.
Yeah, like,
but I don't know. A little something said, let's be a little careful that we think that there's one definition that's universal. I mean, the way it's manifest or acted out in that kind of culture, however, a distortion, if you want to say that, isn't necessarily like two guys in San Francisco go to a bar. It's not like that.
No.
And it's generally not with two men. It's an older and younger one, unless I have all the profile wrong. But so there's another dynamic there too. So it's, but again, the fundamental point could be the same.
Older and younger men and boys, or
Yes.
older and younger men?
Men and boys.
Yeah.
Men and boys. It could be, so there's more, maybe a more complex thing going on there because the distortion that creates that is more profound. I don't know, okay? I don't know. But
Well, that's a good
what I'm
reminder.
thinking of when I hear you say this, though, Pastor Richard, is, but it gets more complicated because women have, and the feminine is trying to understand, the women are trying to understand themselves too in the context of, and I don't want to speak for women, but surely this whole yin and yang concept. So inside any, call it a challenge, difficulty, I don't want to use the word problem, but problem or development is the seed of an aspect of the other side, right? So saying it in a superficial way. Women need men to man up too, to be more
Yes.
free to be what they can be. So both sides are off center.
Right,
It's not that you're all just sitting there saying, I have no more patience.
yeah.
I'll give you 6 months and then,
That's what we're saying. No.
That's what you say on the surface. But the truth is, you don't
But
know
see-
what to be in the meantime quite yourself either. You know what I'm
But
saying?
see, well,
Otherwise,
talk-
why the hell are we killing each other trying to make it work?
But when you talk about man up, the idea of man, when you must man up, is usually interpreted wrong. Sometimes,
Oh, yeah.
sometimes manning up is to be more feminine.
Yeah.
But
And
go ahead.
yeah, I just wanted to add, part of our problem with that is we have no idea what maleness actually is. And it doesn't have anything to do with like all these objective external definitions that we make up out of our ignorance about what it is.
Yeah.
That's why I said it comes from desire. With pure desire comes opportunities to do that you don't recognize until after it's done. You just be, when you desire and just be, then it begins to flow through you, not to you and through you. So that you recognize it retrospectively, as opposed to recognizing it as it's taking place. You can look back at it and say, okay, that worked out, and I'm beginning to see that not my change is coming, but my change is here. It is here. I'm becoming different.
But I think you can also do all of this without a partner.
Of course.
I mean, I
Of course you
think that's the
can.
key thing to remember.
And I
You don't
know.
need to have a partner, you don't need to be married, you don't need to be this. In fact, I can remember parts of my life when I was younger, and maybe I wasn't dealing with it wholly, but there was a balance. There were times in my life when I was lonely, and there were times in my life when I felt so alive and I was alone. And those are not the same times at all.
I know.
You know what
Well,
I'm
but
saying?
I think women have like a double whammy because we're trying to navigate men's expectations, plus trying to find ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's why a lot of women now are choosing not to get married.
It
because
is.
They
Absolutely.
don't
I
have
would-
to deal with that.
I would challenge that and say men feel the same.
Maybe.
Not
I'm
just
supposed to be this kind of man, but, so what's the point of
But it's
arguing?
still all male expectations.
But I'm not gonna argue to, this is 60-40, this is 40-60. It's going on both, and that's why it's,
and I'm
messy.
saying that
anyway.
what changed my perspective in a profound way was when I got to college in DC and began to notice that most of the females with whom I spoke were confiding in me. And over 80% of them had been abused by men. And I began to look at the dynamics of how my quote-unquote family worked. And it was what I began to see from a sociological perspective at that time was subjugation on both sides. Men deferred to the females and females to the men. It was like a balance there. And even if you were the family that I grew up in, if you were to sit and look at them, from a sociological perspective, you would still see that difference to this day when the family comes together as a group. How you see the males doing certain things and the females doing certain things. It is not male and female work. It is the different things that's done in support of each other.
The roles?
It's not so much a role, and I stayed away from that word because it's been so negatively defined.
Gotcha.
It's but the way things are done, they are different than what I experienced in so many other settings when male and females came in contact, and I think that had a huge bearing on how I relate to females. Matter of fact, I don't think I know it did, and I have never felt inadequate in terms of my relationship with females. I have never felt like it was necessary for me to keep a female in line or to move her to living up to my expectations, because my expectations from that point forward consciously has always been what you expect for yourself. and helping her to get through that. So what do you expect for your, so it's not, because I remember very vividly, shortly after we got married, Phoebe was telling me she was going back to school. And that was great. So we were making all the preparation for her to go back to school. And one day I asked her, why? And she said, well, because you want me to. I said, no, just stay in line. You're not going. When you decide that you want to do it because of you, great. But you're not going to do it for me. You have to do this for yourself. I don't want that to be her, I didn't want that to be her expectation that in order to live up to my standards, this is what you have to do. No, be who you are. That's who I am. So I don't have those kinds of odd expectations.
And I mean, that's what it takes to be a real man in the sense of the spiritual nature of masculinity. Be willing to deal with your own fear concerning whatever internally, and take that and make yourself into a better human being, or make yourself into a better man, instead of putting parameters on things that are external to you that you want to control for the purpose of making sure they don't make you come face to face with that uneasiness that we feel.
So if we think we can control our environments then externally, or control our women, then that we think then that we have control when we really don't, where the control really has to be done within
Right.
to have a healthy relationship externally.
Yes. And a friend of mine said something to me years ago. She said, you never try to control something that you're not afraid of.
Right. Right.
And
I think that bears saying again, being restated there.
Well,
you never try to control something that you are not afraid of.
That's it. Whatever you're afraid of, you try to control it.
like 2-year-olds?
That's not control, that's discipline.
Oh.
That's different.
And the one thing that males who don't know how to be men are most afraid of is requiring to merge internally with the feminine. That they don't really understand. They don't really understand because the only descriptions of masculinity they've been given are external and don't really have to do with the essence of what that even is. You would be, well, we males would be more male if we faced our fears and did what we were afraid to do. And that right there is more masculine, and it gets more to the essence of what the spiritual male is supposed to do. Because the default human being is female. Have y'all ever heard that? You can make a baby from 2 eggs. You don't necessarily need a sperm.
Yeah.
And
That goes back to the beginning, the womb.
yeah. So it just points to what maleness actually is. It's a greater degree of the work that has to be done is through masculinity in terms of merging the spiritual with the physical.
Who set all this up?
But Nick, we did. But
Well,
Nick,
I put it on you.
the scenario that I described earlier concerning the freedom to be who you are, right?
Yeah.
To me, that speaks more of the concept or the emotion that we call love than does the thing that we think love is. Because if it's truly love, then the fear is not there, therefore the need to control is not there.
Mm-hmm.
But I think for the most part, what we call love is actually fulfilling the expectation of society to be with someone, as opposed to what love really,
Yeah.
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 And because we define things externally, how we see and not what they actually are, we think that we are love when we check off all those boxes on the list, even if the internal environment is not actually that at all.
Because actually, I think that when you really love someone, the actual physical presence does not have to be there. And the whole concept of I have to know every move you make around you is another way of saying the physical presence has to be there for our relationship to be what it's supposed to be. You know? So it's not a recognition of what's real in a relationship, but it is a fulfillment of the expectation of society.
And I think
Well, that's
as
what you learn about everything, pretty much. Your work, your career, everything as you if you quote unquote mature from the experience of it. You don't need to be the boss, you don't necessarily want to be in this line of work. The difference is, and that's why I think myself, I have never felt that divorce or anything like that and of itself is a bad thing. It's just, it's a very personal, should be private consideration, you know. But why should a forced thing like that, why should you be forced to come out the other end the way you should be when, you know, maybe you got into things for the wrong reason, and maybe as you go through years you discover things about yourself, etc., etc. It's just, it's all in how you deal with it.
And you could have gotten into it for the right reason. But your journey ends at this point because you completed what you're supposed to complete. And by virtue
Well,
of
it doesn't have to, the point is, if it were dealt with more maturely, it wouldn't necessarily end a relationship. It
No.
might actually free a relationship to be what it can be.
Whatever, yeah.
And forget what it was. It's
Yeah.
not like it never should have been. You're here now. So what's the way forward? That's what counts. So a lot of things have changed, I think, in that direction since I was a kid.
Well, now, what you just said, let's look at it spiritually.
Even in Mr. Catholic Church.
Let's look at it spiritually. What we have actually done spiritually is divorce. The Shekinah.
Okay.
Divorce is two forces pulling in a different direction. So we are a force that's pulling in the direction to remain human when we were actually created to be spirit. And that's clearly indicated regardless of the culture that you're in, if you look at it deep enough. So when we look at the whole concept of a divorce as Richard has described it, is simply a manifestation of what's taking place in the realm of the spirit. A continuous divorce process that's taking place of the masculine from the feminine. And a relationship where Audrey talked about where females are taking longer to get married because the feminine is not going to go along just to get along. It is not going to accept anything just to say that they have someone in their lives, which is a representation of the Shekinah saying, I'm not accepting anything. I'm not going to be intimate with you based on your rules and your expectations. If we're going to be intimate, it's going to be based on your desire for truth, for light, you know, for the unicity of our essence, as opposed to my just submitting to you in order to keep you going in a given direction. It's not going to happen anymore. And that in itself, everything that I see that's manifested in the physical, that I see in the physical world, I see it as a manifestation of something that is much larger than what we actually are able to see or to visualize. And so the whole idea, I was at my mom's on Mother's Day, we were sitting around, and I began counting the people who were there. And there were approximately 6 males and 20, 30 females. And that was not the whole family, but it was just about the whole family of males. And I began to think, so why is this? Because the thing that we think about when we think about the feminine is that, especially as a male, the name is gone in terms of your surname.
Mm-hmm.
But I began to think about that. It needs to be obliterated. Because that's where our ego is, tied up in our roots, our name, our surname. The other thing I saw was there is an influx of the desire for Shekinah, for the feminine essence. And with that comes an increase in a manifestation of feminine beings. I believe that my life before inception to this point has been mapped out to see things as I have seen, and for certain things to take place to get me to understand what I understand and to help people on this journey called life. So in this room right now, there are 3 males in this building. I guess now with Rika coming in, it's probably what, 5, 6 now? But for the most part, the dominant conversation is female. You see, the dominant presence is female. That has to have purpose. And I think Nick is touching on that in a very important way. In that the feminine not only must be respected and recognized, but it must also be accepted. See, you can recognize something. You can recognize what it is, you can respect what it is, and still not accept it. And when you're accepting something, it is reflected in how you treat it. You see what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
It's how you deal with it, how you respond to it, how you interact with it. That's what denotes acceptance, not necessarily respect, but acceptance. And that's a major difference in our relationship with the feminine energy that we are constantly in contact with. Hello.
It's marinating.
But I just want to make sure that this is resonating in terms while it marinates, it's a resonate. Yes.
Y'all just talk a lot about us.
I wonder how this discussion today changes from our earlier discussion of this recognition. And I'm asking that question, is it in terms of the depth, more depth to it, and the implications of that discussion on the macro level because it's more depth to it? Just,
Maybe what's happening is that not only is there a change, but it is because of the depth of the discussion. But it may very well be that it's time not only to deal with it from the perspective that we are, but to be more open to an influx of a greater influence. Because I'm sure that there are aspects of our thinking, and I use that very, very loosely, as males, that still needs to be purged, that still needs to be, dealt with, and by virtue of that maleness needing to be dealt with just about thinking, and again loosely, the females also have to deal with that because females have been conditioned in such a way to be subjugated to what we feel. And I think that is so very wrong. And it takes males who are willing to, as Nick says, face those things that they're afraid of and get beyond them so that we can become balanced. And balance does not mean equal.
Right.
It doesn't mean equal in any way whatsoever. If the male testosterone is so strong in 2 males until it takes 30 females, to press it to the point where those two males are ready to look at it and step away from it, that's what's necessary. That's balance. You see where I'm coming from? So, and I'm talking about dominance in a good way. I'm not talking about in terms of manipulation and control.
So is the balance you're talking about, is that the same as beauty?
Yes,
Okay. Because when you see something that's working together,
it's beautiful.
it's so beautiful. Like you see two people together, and I don't want to say chemistry, but you just see things that are just so beautiful.
But ever look at the synchronicity in the room in terms of the number of males and females involved. You see? And when I say, and I must include, when I say in the room, I also have to include Sheldon and Nick, because the energy is here. You see? The
Yes.
focus is here. Every male who's on the phone, the focus is here. Every female who's on the phone, the focus is here. So it is not about physical presence as much as it is about spiritual desire. The intermingling of the energy. And we could not be delving into this deeply unless it is time for us, Barbara Jean, to get to the root of it all. And kill it at the root, so that what's supposed to be rooted can flourish, as opposed to be overgrown.
Something else talking?
Sheldon's in some bar.
Oh, I was gonna say that I think the shift that you were talking about will come about when enough males anyway reach critical mass in terms of where their attention is directed. So what I mean by that is, I think when we can shift balance, and we, us in this room as well, can shift the balance in ourselves enough to the point where it begins to reverberate outwards, where we can shift the balance back towards the spiritual and understanding of the essence of what these things are talking about, then that will reflect outwards in people that we deal with first and foremost, and in people that they deal with, and so on and so on. So I think what really has to happen in order for us to move forward as a collective is to put our attention back on living and being the essence of what these things are.
So then the experiences of femininity and masculinity allow us to recreate that oneness, which is the source of our being. Once we have that balance, instead of those two being dissonant and pulling apart, and one being submissive to the other and the other controlling, it's a complementary understanding and knowing and working in that knowledge, so that we begin to emulate the oneness of our Creator then.
Right?
So Nick,
Gotcha.
maybe, let's just take for instance for a moment. Suppose for a moment that the critical mass of masculinity that you're talking about, reaching that state. Suppose for a moment it only takes, critical mass would be the males who are intermingling with this energy that we're talking about now, just them. That's critical mass, if we're on the same page. To change everything else.
But isn't that the root of some of these men groups that are, who the guys who go out in the Arizona desert and beat drums and all kinds of, it's sort of, that's what I think part of that is. the initiative part of that, isn't it?
Well, I think that's what the idea of it is, but
Well,
it's not right.
Yeah, I'm not talking about that, I'm just talking about, there's a sense of dealing with that.
Yes, but I went to Promise Keepers, and there are a couple of reasons why I didn't go back after I had gone. But the major reason I didn't go back is because it was supposed to be about men treating the females right, when in actuality it was about men dominating females. That's what the bottom line was. Continuing in the state that you are, but do it in a nicer fashion. And I think that was one of the reasons I had to go, to see that for myself. So most of the male groups that I have encountered, regardless of the culture that they come from, is all about perpetuating the maleness of everything, as opposed to recognizing that we have been off base for such a long time, and it's time for us to pull things back into balance. And it's almost like we're afraid of losing control.
Well, I mean, the feminine side of it is the same, because I remember and went through it, and it was just how to submit properly in a ladylike fashion and be how to be subservient. That was like the definition of a holy woman is a subservient one.
What was that great book that came out, every total woman, where you're supposed to wrap yourself in, what do you call it, cellophane at the front door when your husband, it's all that kind of stuff, so. But I think some of these groups don't bring women into it. It's about men and getting inside of this thing about men. So I think it's a mixture. Like anything out there, you've got the good, the bad, and the ugly, pretending to be the right path kind of thing.
And I think one of the things
Still,
that I'm dealing with is that I have such a proclivity to defer to the female, and it's been like that for a long time. I look to females for direction. I don't have an issue with females being in a place of what we call authority, or I don't have issue. Matter of fact, I embrace it wholeheartedly. When I write something, I ask for feedback from most of the teachers, but the feedback that I look at probably with a great intensity is the feedback that comes from the females. And the reason I think that is so is because invariably it comes from a totally different perspective. But what I'm beginning to notice is that the females who are in this place of quote unquote teacher, the feedback is on pretty much the same page. It is beginning to gel is what I'm saying. And now the male feedback, all of it is beginning to reflect the same thing, where in the beginning it didn't. Can you see what I'm saying? And one of the reasons I put forth and postulate that maybe we are the ones who are Chinese critical mass is because what popped in my head Nick, when you said the words critical mass was the 12 teachers and the covering, which is 13. 13, the number that binds everything together. And I also looked at it from the understanding that there were those who look at the 12 teachers and say that, well, you don't have 12 teachers. You have 10. Because Audrey and Janice don't teach. Yes, they do. The energy that's brought to the group is paramount to what we do. There's no doubt about that. From the feedback that comes from the people who've seen us, when we come together. So I think what's happening is that with this shifting of the paradigm, we also have to see that the paradigm of what a teacher is shifting. You don't necessarily have to sit in front of people to teach. It's simply the energy that you bring to the table in terms of facilitating from your seat or from where Nick is in DC. It doesn't matter. And the choices are not made by virtue of I like you, I don't like you, or you smart, you not smart. The choices are made by greater being than I. You just follow the dictates of what of what you sense, and the rest falls into place. So I think that this number of teachers and this freedom that we have with each other speaks to the idea of critical mass. Like last week, Kathy was teaching, and she made a statement concerning something in relationship to darkness and light, and I said, I don't see it that way. So let's talk it out. Well, after we finished talking it out, one of the things we talked about after, not just Kathy, but Ron and the rest of us, was that, you know what? Say that in another setting. Let someone be standing up teaching in another setting and tell them, I don't see it the way you see it. And see what happens. That speaks to the trust. That speaks to the respect that we're able to do that kind of thing. That's what I'm talking about. Maybe that's what brings it to critical mass. Maybe that's what brings it to balance. Maybe that's the shovel that digs up the roots that has been so pervasive in the past. Maybe, just maybe, that it is that group or this group of, or not this group, but it is this type of energy that is necessary to shift the entire paradigm of how male and female relate to each other. Maybe that's it. And could we have this even have this discussion that's on a paradigm shift if I being the covering saw things differently? No, it would not happen. If you being the ones whom I cover saw things differently, it would not happen. It takes us being on the same page. That's what it takes, and not just the 12. The 12 is just a cap. It takes the people involved, everyone that's involved. It's not the teachers and us and the teachers, the separation. That's not it at all. It's the servants and those who are being served. Can you see the picture here?
Yes.
It's the servants and those who are being served. When we come together, we are learning how to be better servants, as opposed to learning what we go teach you. We're becoming better servants so that we can serve the needs. And when I say needs, I'm talking about be of service to those things that need to be exposed in you. Things that are already there.
And and not only that too, but what you do is very critical, we can't take it lightly.
No, not at all. Not in the least bit. No. Honestly, if I felt for a moment that any one of the 12 was taking it lightly, they wouldn't be there. Yeah, if I felt like I was taking it lightly, I would leave. My pact with the Creator from day one of my journey has been, if for any reason I knowingly mislead the people, take my life instantly. If it's pointed out that I was wrong in an instance and I pursue it knowing that I'm wrong, I want my life to end immediately, because I'm not worthy to call myself a covering. At the time it was a preacher, but that's what I'm talking about. It has to be taken that seriously. I do not take for granted what Nick is doing, the doors that he's opening. Nick is one of the best students I've ever had. And I say that not discouraging, not saying he's better than anyone else, but I say one of the best. And the reason I say that is because it's been easier, because he was not exposed to all this stuff that we have been exposed to, and all the stuff that we had to dig up. He has not had to do that. And I think that the Creator brought him into the presence for such a time as this, so that those things can be uncovered. Because when Nick said Lucifer, bearer of light, it was like a tunnel opened to me. I had never seen it from that perspective before. But when it happened, a mountain of wisdom poured from that. Those are the kinds of things I'm talking about. Yes, Evelyn, this is crucial. Not just for this room, not just for us, This is crucial for the human, period. Period. I believe that. And I treat it like we're the only people in the world who do what we do. So Nicholas, I put a pin in your head, let that out.
Well, thank you. So now let's talk about what's the man and woman, what's the male and the female energy. Something going on?
Oh no,
No.
the baby talking.
A cousin, your cousin.
So once the male and the female have the ability to reconcile, or once the reconciliation has taken place, and if there is any truth in reconciliation, that it would be on a internal spiritual level, or that's where it needs to be anyway.
Sure.
Once that takes place, then the male and the female energies can have intercourse properly and in a balanced way. So what that is, and what the essence of what sexuality is your ability, and we said this before, but now I think we have a better understanding of what is actively going on in terms of our experience of what the essence of this is. And that's what I want to speak to, because we can do that for ourselves at every waking moment. We can improve that and learn to draw from it. So what the essence of what sexuality is of course your ability to interface with the Creator and to bridge the gap, so to speak, and close the distance, so to speak, between two things that appear to be in opposition, just like male and female. So what it is reconnecting with your higher self and your inner self, and learning to draw from that, and learning to cultivate what that produces. So physical intercourse is when it's done in a ritualistic way that it has been done with the essence of what it is in mind, becomes a reverberator for that inner process. And just like anything that is physical, it is an extension of the spiritual into matter. Now, matter and spirit are not different things, but they are different in terms of how we experience them. So when two people come together, or when male and female polarities come together that way, then what they have the ability to reverberate outwards into the rest of the physical world is that unity with our ultimate self, or the unity with the Creator, which has the ability to transform everyone's experience in the physical. Questions? Let's see, concerned looks. What's up?
You said the ability to transform what?
What did I just say? The ability to transform everyone's experience of the physical.
And you
I
talking
think is what I
about
said.
intercourse, right?
Yeah.
And that does not necessarily have to be the desire of everyone involved in intercourse, but it has to, for that to happen, it has to be someone who is in search of light, truth, whatever, and recognizing that this is not an obligation, this is not a job, this is who you are. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
That when you take into account what Nikki just said about influencing everyone else, bringing light to the physical realm, you don't see it as a job or obligation. That's just who you are. Because if you see it as a job, then the intent is wrong. Because you said, well, I just got to do this, so let me get it over with. I really don't want to do it, you know, that kind of thing. But when that's who you are, then it's a natural flow, and you don't even have to make yourself conscious of it at the moment, because that's who you are. Is that pretty much it, Nick?
Mm-hmm. I was thinking, and it's funny that it's distinctly British, but you ever heard of like high society, high class British families don't have children because they want to; they have children because they have to. And they tell the women, or like, I'm pretty sure maybe I got this from Downton Abbey or something, but just lie back and think of England.
All right, you just blew it.
Yeah, just run out of wisdom. I'm sorry.
I changed my mind.
Let's actually talk. Okay. I just gave it to you in a way that's funny. So, Britain in particular, I don't know what it is about Britain, but Britain is the least spiritual. That sounds it's the least spiritual place on the face of the earth, historically speaking.
Yeah.
So when you think about it, an attitude which comes from aristocracy, which of course comes from monarchy, it just gets passed on down. That attitude towards the act of intercourse is indicative of what their inner understanding of what that is. In that there is no inner understanding of it in terms of the spiritual fruit that it produces. Which is why the materialist attitude that we usually think of when we think of materialism started in Britain, in that part of Europe. There's a guy named Rupert Sheldrake, who is actually a British scientist, who's done studies to show how minds can be connected in non-physical ways. And one of the things he found, during his studies anyway, was that British people on average were the least sensitive in that way. And so of course it doesn't mean every British person, but it does mean when you look at groups of people and large populations, you can see things begin to express themselves more easily. But it does mean that the culture and the attitudes and the way that they thought and the types of thinking that were produced in that region were not conducive to allowing the energy that is coming from within us to flow outwards. So, anyway, that's where that came from. But the reason many other cultures were not so uptight about it, or not so antagonistic towards what that was, or what intercourse is because originally,
Just thinking how all the influx of Indians are reshaping what England is. Because that.
what'd you say?
Nothing. I was just laughing to myself in a way about that whole joke that the homeland for Indians is Britain, not India. That whole, and the percentage of Indians that now live in India have assimilated England. I never, how can you're not allowed to be one country and have three names. That's just not right. But anyway, they do. And I just wonder how bringing any of that Hindu perspective, tradition, spirituality has confounded the mix. But anyway.
Well, one thing it's doing is diffusing the original cultural attitudes and things like that back into a place where they're not they didn't naturally form. Having said that, though, there has to be a marriage and there has to be an intercourse between what those two cultures represent. There has to be a marriage between the more materialistic aspects of European culture and the more intuitive aspects of most of the other cultures. Because materialism without an understanding of the essence of what it is you're dealing with doesn't produce anything. intuition, or you can think of it like being right-brained without being able to articulate it with your intellect, can lead to negative repercussions as well. So, but there has to be people who recognize that, and just like we're talking about, there has to be people who see the necessity for understanding that the essence of what these things are, and the need for those two to have intercourse properly again. Because once you create the environment, once the student makes itself ready, the master will appear. And the master are those people who are involved in the process of reintegrating themselves so that all of this can become available to everyone else.
I think the key phrase in that, Nick, is so that everything can become available to everyone else. That it is not being on this journey to change me or to change you. Is in the journey to have, so the whole paradigm can shift for everyone. You know, because I can't change you. You make a decision on your own. I can't even change me. I make a decision to be different, and the change comes.
But we said earlier here, when we were focused more on the Kabbalah and the whole idea of the broken vessels, the idea of to receive in order to give.
Yeah.
So all of this, and I can't believe the 60s was the first time.
I can hear you.
I can't believe the 60s was the first time, but maybe we were more conscious of it because of communication, etc. And now with the internet, all of this, the East flooding into the West to want to learn the technology, the West flooding into the East to want to learn the spirituality, so to speak, created a new jumble, out of which comes both maybe more enlightenment and more confusion too, because there's always turbulence, I think, from that. But which is why I was thinking earlier that it's classically British and Western that you'd have the phrase from, I forget the writer, East is East and West is West, and never the twain shall meet, which by a lot of people's definition today I think would be dead wrong. It's the Catholic Church trying to maintain control. It's all that kind of, you know, it's the white guy making everybody else into quadroons and everything else, and everybody else just says, now come on over, you know.
It's like, I think it's more, the danger in that is this, is making sure that you integrate and not assimilate. Because what happened with us as a people in America, we assimilated. We did not integrate. We left everything that we thought was valuable behind and took everything that white America thought was valuable. But if we had integrated, it would have been infusing what we felt was valuable with what the white America felt was valuable. And if you take that on a broader scale, it's important that, whether it be in India, Japan, or wherever, that an integration of thought takes place, as opposed to them assimilating into that society and taking that thought upon themselves, or that energy upon themselves, and being more British than the British. That kind of thing.
Which is what a trip to Africa will teach you about being black.
Absolutely.
You'll know Mac and then me. And a lot of Africans views. Anyway.
So, are we there yet?
Does anybody else have any questions or anything? We can let that marinate for a little bit.
Well, maybe to go back to the phrase I put out earlier, which I find isn't male or female. It's unassimilated sexuality expressed as lack of intimacy. So then what is, I don't know that I have something to bounce around about what sexuality is.
What is unassimilated sexuality?
It means that if you don't, well, what do you do when you assimilate something? You absorb, you accept, you acknowledge.
So you're
If
talking
you don't
about
acknowledge
sexuality
your own
like in
sexuality,
in a
and I don't
natural
mean male
state?
versus female, the fullness of it, then I think it's easy. And we've said in here, there's a, it
Well,
Easy
to
to
get to
tie
the-
it
control.
reinforces the sense of separateness,
letting
which
the
creates
other
the
person be
alienation,
themselves.
the loneliness, the distortions that we live with in varying degrees until we find our way back to, what do you want to call it, unity, to etc. And we're just saying that that's very much at the core.
Well, it just speaks to what the essence of sexuality is in an individual. And it really just has to do with accepting all the things that are in you.
But I guess I'm saying that, yeah, so then you're saying that the way we define what sexuality is very commercial, superficial.
Right. I mean, it's just based on whatever is
It's not.
whatever is satisfying to our ego, or whatever we may desire that is more external. But what sexuality is allowing all the different aspects of ourselves that we feel and understand internally, accepting all of them and allowing them to have their fullest expression. So, and just like Pastor Richard was talking about earlier, we can sort of recognize them and agree that they are there, but that's a little bit different than accepting them. And for males in particular, it has to do with things that we would externally attribute to females that we would be like, oh, I'm not going to do that. I feel all this. I want to hug that guy. No. Get started when you start trying to talk about like homosexuality and how scared males are of that, and like not understanding what that is and whether or not they want to be more intimate with males and what that means and all that. But it just means that we have to not be afraid to accept what we feel, understand what we feel, and allow that to have its presence in our experience and allow it to influence our behavior and how we treat other people in order to be more complete males, more complete people. And that's really where I think loneliness or lack of or feeling like you're connected to somebody comes from. It's totally about your internal experience and how you translate that out in terms of your relationships with other people. But if it's right with you first, or right with us first, then not only will other people be drawn to it, we will be able to feel more complete even while we are alone. And even when we feel more complete while we are alone, we recognize that our need to be with someone else is not so we can feel complete. It's in recognition that the need to be with someone else is to complete the very purpose for which our completeness exists.
But then implied in that too, I think, is it not then the definition of to be with someone else is incredibly more broad than we allow, culturally we allow the definition. You don't have to be boyfriend, girlfriend, engaged, married, etc. or friend. You know what I'm saying? It's much more, it's much less boxed.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So you have no business telling somebody else, really characterizing somebody else's relationships to other people. They could be 100 times more profound than your officially adopted and accepted think of it, whatever,
And that,
marriage, whatever.
that in itself, the feeling the need to characterize that, in itself speaks to the box that we have that we created for ourselves, called this world, called this life. You know, I mean, we are always creating boxes for ourselves.
Well, it's back to you control what you're afraid of
Yeah.
or don't understand. So you create a box, same difference. And we're just afraid of the ultimate sort of freedom, not having to have those definitions. So we're constantly telling each other what they should understand those things to be. When if you have enough self-awareness, you'd say, you might tolerate it, but privately you'd say, blah, 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 you know, la 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 la, right?
Yeah.
Not me, but I'm not going to create a fight by, you know, drawing a line in the sand, you know, and saying, well, let's talk about you for a minute.
I think that the way to deal with that, we've talked about this several times, but I suppose specifying what we're talking about. The way to deal with that is to allow things to play out. Just let things be what they are, as opposed to identifying them and characterizing them in the way that you think they should be characterized. And just when things play out, they invariably play out the way they're supposed to. The results of what they're supposed to be. And I tell you the truth, I live a much simpler life since I've begun to let things be what they are, as opposed to me saying, you know what, if this happens, I'm going to do this, that kind of thing. That is so complicated.
I just want to get 5 more things done and then I'll be like that. It's the bathroom.
It's just fine. I mean, you know, and I find myself in places or situations where it's like, well, you don't need to do that, just sit there. Just shut up. And that's what I do. I just sit there. And it's not that I'm disconnected from reality. As a matter of fact, I am reality. What I'm disconnected from is the box.
I mean, if that's what retirement is supposed to be, really, then you should be retiring in your early 30s. So you have the whole rest of your life to be that relaxed, free, open, etc.
I'm with it.
Well, now you got to let go of the notion that retirement is a material thing.
Well, I mean, there's that whole habit of
I'm
eating
talking about
that I
myself,
have.
too.
I don't know.
Yeah, and my retirement is not the absence of labor in terms of the physical realm, because that is necessary.
It's
My
fun.
idea of retirement is been different in terms of my material search, being on this material journey. I got to fix everything. I got to provide everything. I have to do everything. No, I don't.
Right.
And this has been a huge part of me for quite some time. You know, I really don't. And there are people who think that I'm just laid back and disconnected. I'm more connected than I've ever been in my life. I'm more aware of everything around me than I've ever been in my life. I'm more aware of what people are feeling and thinking than I have ever been in my life. With no effort whatsoever other than to say, let it be what it is. And the reason I say things like let it be what it is because I don't have a better way to articulate what I'm trying to say. I really don't. I don't even know how to articulate what I feel other than, you know, we call it relaxation or being, you know, disconnected. I'm not disconnected. I'm not relaxed. But at the same time, I don't allow circumstances to guide me. I don't. I'd rather allow them to guide me. I guide them by virtue of letting them flow. That's it. Go where you want to go. Do what you want to do. But there's absolutely nothing on this earth that's bad. There's absolutely nothing in the scriptures that's evil. There's absolutely nothing in the other realm that's bad or evil as we call it evil. I'm not talking about unrightness, the understanding of evil. There's nothing at all. And when you get to the place of accepting that, it is a lot easier, not easy, but a lot easier to experience what I'm talking about. At least for me anyway. And I would that you do those 5 things and come join me.
Huh?
I want you to do those 5 things and
It's
come
probably
to
only 3. I'm too much like my dad. I used to tease him all the time. He tried to do 5 things every day and get 3 done, so that meant tomorrow he had to do 7.
Yeah.
And I'm like, Dad, why don't you try to do 2 and do 4, and tomorrow you can take the day off? It never worked, never got it done. Well, that reminds me a little bit of that wonderful, that nice little movie about the Marigold Hotel. I don't know if any of you have seen it. It's about some British people who retire in India because their health care plans, blah, blah, blah. And there's a little phrase in there about, it's an Indian expression, Hindu expression that says that all things end well. And if your situation hasn't ended well, it's not the end.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's it.
I paraphrased it. I went off the actual wording. Go see the movie.
But you actually articulated what I figured.
And the second thing they say in that movie that I think is so real, true, is someone's complaining about India is just a smelly, dirty place. And the guy says, yeah, it's full of all these wonderful perfumes and things. Indians act as if they appreciate the opportunity to be alive. Think about yourself and how we act.
Yeah.
We have a right to be alive. We should be, blah, blah, blah. It's a privilege for them.
And it should be for all of us. Always a
And
privilege.
think of the extremes in India, because they're northern Africa. It's pretty much, you want to smell and see everything? Go to India.
Okay.
There ain't nothing left.
So I think next week what I want to do is get more into, so let's say now that the femininity has the space it needs in order to begin to understand itself, what that looks like is what I want to get into next week. And I honestly can't do that as well as it needs to be done because I'm a male. But I can help give insight into how you can help bring that out of yourself, ladies.
Thank you. I'll be here.
Me too.
Say that again. You said he can or he can't?
You can.
And.
Okay, good, because that's what this is all building up to.
Okay.
Buy his book and his DVD. Help me retire early.
And working it, is it?
I get somebody else to do those 3 projects.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you all too.